All right, here we go. Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's session with your temporary guide and host and coach, your friend and you. My name's Oliver Blue, and it gives me a great pleasure to be with you today as we look into or continue to look into workbook lesson 151, which we started on our prior lesson and did not get through it. And so we decided to take our time because there's a lot here that we need to embrace. And so here today, we're going to be finishing this up so we can call this workbook lesson 151 part 2. These lessons are being provided by Truly Foundation, your nonprofit organization that is so dedicated to sharing advanced spirituality. And we're currently in a project that's we're using this spiritual resource called A Course in Miracles, which is a spiritual book that is believed, I believe it, that it was God's way of getting more specific information to us to help us to come to understand who we are, to help bring more clarity around all things and everything. A way for us to really get to the source of the blocks, to the awareness that love is always present, and that is through focusing on the renewal of the mind. We realize here in this training that it is the mind that has it is the mind that has thought itself to be separate from its creator, and thus going out and creating or making on its own from a point of view of separation, and not from the one point of view that only exists, and that is reality, or that is God. And so the mind has to be disciplined, has to be trained. And so this really is a course in mind training. It's a course in healing. It's a course in correction. And so we are glad that you are alone for the journey with us, and you have made this quality decision to be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of the mind, as it is mentioned in the book of Romans in the Bible. So yesterday we started talking about the subject being all things are echoes of the voice of God, which is just a broad statement that says that in everything, God can be God uses everything as a means for teaching, or a means for awakening, or a means for directing us to the truth. All things can be used by God and are being used by God in everyone's life. Your life, the content of your experience, your events, your activities, your relationships, your experiences, everything, every physical thing, every non-physical thing, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your sensation, everything is encompassed within the reality of love, the reality of God. Though it may be sending out appearances and sending out messages that are contrary to God's nature, which is love, the wisdom of God has the ability to take every experience that we have and shine truth through those experiences to bring us to a place of awareness, place of oneness, place of understanding. And so this whole idea in workbook lesson 151 is that we start from a place of what the ego would have us to a place where the ego would have us to start, and that is a place of judgment. And on yesterday, remember, we said that no one can judge on partial evidence. They said that is not judgment. That is merely an opinion based on ignorance and doubt, because we don't have all the information, and we do, and we even have doubt about the information that we do have. And so that's not true judgment. In fact, Jesus employed us through his wisdom teaching to not judge, because we and when he says do not judge, he's talking about do not judge with the mind that believes in separation. Do not judge with the mind that is wrecked with fear. Do not judge from a place of sin consciousness and guilt and fear, because you don't have all the information. He says it's partial evidence. And so this world in and of itself presents to us appearances and ideas to help shape our fears and our belief and our allegiance to ideas that are not contrary, ideas that are contrary to our reality. And it goes on to explain that, we get highly developed in learning the ways of the world, to where we believe, it becomes our belief system, to where we believe evidence that's coming from limited sources like our own eyes and our own ears. It says you place pathetic faith in what your eyes and your ears report. He calls that pathetic faith. Why? We already know we can't depend on what the eye see or what the ear hear. It is not complete evidence. And it says so it's pathetic faith if that's what we're basing our judgments on, because that definitely is partial evidence. But there is one that has complete knowledge, complete awareness, complete insight into everything. And that one is what we call reality, or what we call God. And what we're saying is that we, in our rightful place, in our rightful mind, we are a part of that one that knows all things. And it's our responsibility as we go through these workbook lessons to identify that it is the mind that needs to be healed. Once the mind is healed and brought into its rightful place, its rightful function as a servant to the Son of God, it will begin to function as a excellent helper to us, so that we are able to rightly divide, that we're able to rightly discern, that we'll be able to see things and express things from the one point of view that is true and true always. And so we have all experienced being not accurate in our judgments because we don't have all the information. And so here the Course says it's just a mere opinion. It's a mere opinion based on ignorance and doubt. And we don't want to operate from that place. When what's available to us is all the infinite intelligence there is. And all of that is found within ourselves. It's not out there. It's a part of our nature. It is who we are. And as we let go of our belief and other causes and other resources, and as we join in with the truth that is true about us always, and begin to listen and begin to exchange the error for correction, then we become that light that we are. We become the love that we are. And we move from a place of judgment. We move from a place of judgment where we're judging ourselves, judging others, and judging this world. From a place of sin, guilt, and fear to a place of love where there is no judgment. There's only reality. And so yesterday we said that, doubt is of the ego. Where there's doubt, that's an indication that, we're being influenced by that which has its foundation in separation. And then we said that certainty, absoluteness, is of God. Truth is of God. Knowledge is of God. Reality of God. There's only one law. That's the law of God. And that law is unalterable, it's eternal, and it's unambiguous. It can be unrecognized, but it can't be changed. It's changeless. It's everything that God creates. And God creates only one thing. And that is the I am. And it says only God in love creates reality. It's beyond learning. It's beyond time and space. There's no opposites, no beginning, no end. It merely is. So reality merely exists. Aware presence. Love's presence is always everything that there is. And so everything that is antithetical to that or opposite, because in God, in heaven, there are no opposites. They are merely dreams. They are merely illusions. And this course is helping us to recognize the illusions and the dreams and not be led around by them, but to bring the illusions to the truth so that the illusions can disappear and so that we can walk in the truth that is true always, so that we can walk in freedom that is ours. So we concluded on yesterday that you cannot trust the witnesses and the false appearances that the body eyes sees or the body ears hears. Our 5 physical senses are very limited in their capacity. They're very limited. They're only subject to the, physicality of this world. They're only subject to time and space. But we are something that's beyond time and space. We're beyond form. Reality is beyond time and space and beyond form. Even the Course says that time and space and form are illusions in themselves. But God, the Holy Spirit, our true self can take these things that are illusionary and make them useful in time and space. And so the judgment that we hear, not only of the world and of others and of ourselves, that doesn't have its foundation in love, it's no more than the voice of an ego that only sees its end, that only sees its ultimate nothingness, and trying to convince you that that is your fate, and it's not your fate. The voice that chatters in our head, negativity, the voice that chatters within our head and tells us that we're less than what God created us to be, that calls us sinners and weak and failures and all of the things that are contrary to what God has created like unto himself, which is us. And so we have to learn, and we are learning in this process how to look through, how to look past and see love only, because that's all that there really is. And so we cannot trust the witnesses and the false appearances in whatever form they present themselves, in voices, in our sight, even with other people coming and telling us, what we can and can't do and be and have and give and share and express. Come in many forms. And we have to recognize what they are and give them no credence in our life. And so we're going to start today by saying, hear not this voice. The witnesses it sends to prove to you its evil is your own or false. So this voice of the ego is a false voice. It says, listen, hear not this voice, and speak with certainty of what they do not know. It says, your faith in them is blind because you would not share the doubts their Lord cannot completely vanquish. You believe to doubt his vassals is to doubt yourself. So part of the mind discipline that we're going through is learning not to what? Learning not to hear the voice of the ego. And learning not to place any faith, any trust in its content. It says, yet you must learn to doubt their evidence. So if there to be any doubt, we are to doubt the evidence that the ego will show us. It says we must learn to doubt their evidence. Will clear the way to recognize ourselves. So training ourselves not to hear, not to embrace anything that is not in alignment with God in love as what he created when he created us as love, when he created us as eternal, as formless and birthless, when he created us like unto himself. We are just like God. And it's only through a belief in separation, that you're separate from God, that you would entertain the voice, that you will entertain the inaccurate description of who you are. It's only when there's some sense of separation, some sense of guilt, some sense of fear, that we entertain other voices, the voice of the ego, that is designed to keep you from the knowledge of the truth. And so here is saying, yet we must learn to doubt their evidence. Doubt the evidence that the world will show us, the world will communicate to us, that is contrary to our reality. It says, and let the voice for God alone only be judge of what is worthy of your own belief. So here we're talking about surrendering our choice to allow the voice that speaks for God to be our only judge, to be our only voice. So we yield to the voice of truth. It says, he will not tell you that your brother should be judged by what your eyes behold in him. So the voice for truth would tell us not to judge our brother by what we see or by what we hear. That's what the ego would want us to do, to help promote the separation, to help to promote the isolation, to help to project guilt and judgment on someone else. The spirit, the voice that speaks with God would tell us not to do that. It would tell us not to do that. Why? It says, he will not tell you that your brother should be judged by what your eyes behold in him, nor what his body's mouth says to your ears, nor what your fingers touch reports to him. So we're not to rely on what we see and what we hear and what we touch as a complete as a complete information that will cause us to judge another or even judge ourselves. And boy, that takes discipline. That takes discipline. But you've heard, like I heard, your eyes will fool you. Your ears will fool you too. The touch will fool you also. All of the things in the physical realm has the ability to deceive us. It cannot be our final, complete, whole evidence about anything. It's only partial, according to this. It's only partial evidence. It says, he passes by such idle witnesses. So the voice that speaks for God and that will speak to us will pass by idle witnesses that the world would show us, that the physical senses would show us, which merely bear false witness to God's Son. So what he's saying here is that in this world, you don't have to do anything or be anything. Just being in this world in a body. The world is designed to communicate to you and to bear witness to you that you are not who you are. That you are not an eternal being, that you are not whole and complete, that you are not innocent, that you are not sinless. The world in and of itself is designed to communicate to you everything that is opposite of what you are and who you are. And it even comes from those, can come through the voices. It can come through the sight of those that we say we love. It can even come through ourselves. We hear the judgments within ourselves. We've learned to tune into a voice that speaks of the ego's thought system of separation and judgment and guilt and sin consciousness. We've highly trained ourselves to listen to that voice, to tune in to that vibration. It's not just going to go away. You have to discipline yourself. We have to go through this training. You have to make a concerted effort to know the truth that sets us free. And so it says, he recognizes only what God loves. The voice of truth that speaks to us, that is very faint and that we very rarely hear because of all the noise in the world, because of our attention has been distracted by this voice of the ego. This voice that we don't hear because of all the busyness, all the activity, all of the ruckus shrieking that the world turns on each and every day, in each moment of the day, to keep us distracted from the silence and the quietness of our own self. It's there to just keep you away from peace. And so it says that he recognized only what God loves. And in the holy light of what he sees, do all the ego's dream of what you are vanish before the splendor in which he beholds. So there has to be an intention on our part to hear the voice that speaks for God. Here, our title for today, it says, all things are echoes of that voice. So within everything, within every experience, within each moment of the day, we can turn away from the ruckus shrieking of this world, from the noise of this world, and turn within to hear the voice that speaks for God, to hear the voice that speaks for love. But there has to be a concerted effort on our part to do that. Thus we have a course in healing. Thus we have a course in miracles. Thus we have 1,000 other paths that will encourage you to spend time of meditation, time of communion, time of fellowship with your true self, with your creator and the creator and the creation. So it's pointing us to a discipline within our life. Not to build a routine or some other uh, shrine around some process that we might create. No, that's not what he's saying. But what he's saying is that we have to grow up. We have to mature to where we come to a place in our life where we place first things first in our day, in our life. We realize who we are. We realize the need to step aside, to pull aside. And in quietness, hear the voice that speaks for God to us in all his loveliness. Otherwise, we get up each day and we just plunge into the ego world, which is designed to just continue to cover up and to build defenses so that the truth cannot be experienced. It cannot be heard. And so he says, let him be judge. Let our true self be the judge. Let the spirit, that Holy Spirit that we are, let it be judge, or let God be judge, or let love be judge. Not our individuated, separated self, but let love be judge. He says, let love be judge. Of what you are, of what we are. Let God be the judge of what we are. He created us, so let him be the judge. It says, for he has certainty in which there is no doubt. For he has certainty for where there is no doubt, because it rests on certainty. So great that doubt is meaningless before its face. So the Creator, who created creation through extension, is certain about what was created. Is certain about not only its own reality, but the reality of that which it extends. God is certain about who he is, or who she is, or who it is. And God is certain about who you are and who we are, because we are what he or she or it is, because what we are an extension with a very extension of the same self that God is. So God is absolutely certain about your loveliness. God is absolutely certain about your sinlessness. God is absolutely certain about your guiltlessness. God is absolutely certain about your nature, about your reality, about your eternal self. God is absolutely certain about the changelessness, the unalterability that you are. God is completely certain that you remain as you were created. What is not certain about that is the mind that believes that it's separate, and that is what we are bringing into alignment by going through these workbook lessons. The prodigal mind, the prodigal son, the son that is lost, all that is symbolic of an ego thought system of separation, an ego thought system, an illusionary self. All of that is what have brought about this entire world. All of that is what has brought about all of the signals and the appearances and the voices that would communicate the exact opposite of what God created. And what God knows, what he created, can't be changed. So the part of us that may be experiencing separation, lack, fear, doubt, sin consciousness, guilt, pain, suffering, the part of us that are experiencing that That is only an illusion. It's not real. It's not the truth. It's a dream. And the dream ends when we wake up to the reality of our changeless self, that we remain as God created us. It's just that simple. And so what? He said, don't judge with that. That judgment is unto a falsehood that you would never want to experience, not even for yourself, not even for another human being. So don't use that. That's only going to bring on more suffering, more pain, more guilt, more despair, more heartache. No. He said, I am the one and the only one, because I know all things, that can be the rightful judge. He said, and I judge with all certainty.
Okay, I found this on the web for it, and I judge with
all certainty. He says, certainty so great that doubt is meaningless before its face. Christ cannot doubt himself. Notice now. So the real you, who we really are, cannot doubt ourselves. God doesn't doubt. That's why you heard Jesus said it so many times in his ministry. Doubt not, fear not. Fear not, doubt not. Why? Because he knew it's all part of what? The belief in separation. He says, certainty. He says, Christ cannot doubt himself. The voice for God can only honor him. Your true self will only honor you. And when you understand this, that this honor is that comes from God only, it's for everyone. And when you understand that, then we will cease from judging others based on that belief in separation. He says, the voice for God can only honor him, rejoicing in his perfect and everlasting sinlessness. We are perfect, and we are everlasting sinlessness in God's sight, in the truth, in reality. We have not been altered. We have not been changed by any of the events or the activities of this world, by any of the history. It's like a movie. You go to the movie, you watch it, and you see all of the events, all the activity. When the movie is finished, it says the end, and then you get up and walk out. You don't stay sitting in the seat and say, oh, this is the real world. Oh, we got to deal with all this. No, you don't. You realize it was just a movie. So when you realize that all that we have learned that is contrary to the reality of who we are was just a false appearance, was just a movie or a dream of separation, then we can what? We walk away from all those appearances, all those voices, because they're meaningless. It's that simple. And so here it says the voice for God honors us in our perfection and in our sinlessness. And I know when I say that we're sinless and all humanity is sinless, that is a challenge to the ego mind. Because that's his strongest card. That's his strongest trump card that it plays on us. We have been so indoctrinated with the idea of sin, guilt, and fear that we believe that it's real, and it's not real. I've said it before. I'll keep saying it. The Course says it. It is not real. And so it says, whom he has judged can only laugh at guilt. When you really understand this, you'll laugh at the idea of being separate from God. You'll laugh at the idea of sin, guilt, and fear. He says, unwilling now to play with toys of sin. He calls it toys of sin. They said that, the ego mind is what? Child's play. It's children toys. When we get angry and we walk in unforgiveness and we hold grievances and resentments, that, the Course calls that what? Children's toys, child play. He calls it here. He says it. The word that is used here is toys of sin. It's like being in a sandbox and you're throwing sand in one another's eyes. That's kind of metaphoric for what we do when we walk away from the truth and go and sit in the sandbox of the ego and throw sand in one another's eyes, accusing one another, judging one another, blaming one another, being divided and separate from one another. That's children play. So this whole world, for the most part, is child play. The whole history of the world has been child play. But when one wakes up and realizes the truth, he says that we laugh at guilt. We laugh at sin. We laugh at judgment. We laugh at the falsity of the ego. And so he says, unwilling now to play with toys of sin, unheeding of the body's witnesses. We don't give any heed no more to the body witnesses. Before the rapture of Christ's holy face. Because once we see the face of Christ in all humanity, once we see the sinlessness and the guiltlessness and the fearlessness and the lack of judgment in all humanity, once we really see that, in order to see that, you have to see that in yourself. You have to see the innocence in yourself first. That's what Jesus meant when he said, first take the 2x4 out of your eye before you look into your brother's eye. Because as long as you got the 2x4 in your eye, the 2x4 of sin consciousness, the 2x4 of guilt, the 2x4 of fear, the 2x4 of judgment, the 2x4 of believing in separation. He said, before you do anything, pull that out, because that's not the right point of reference. That's not the right point of view. And you don't want to judge nor be judged with that point of view. He says, and thus he judges you. And thus we are now judged with all the information. Not just partial evidence, but we have the truth that is true always about who we are. That's the place of judgment that we all stand. God has already judged his creation. God has already judged himself. He's already judged his creation. And he judged all of us in righteousness. That's what Jesus came to demonstrate to all of us, that we've been judged, and we've been judged in righteousness. That now we're the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. Now we are holy and without blame before him in love. As it says in Ephesians and Colossians, that even before the foundation of the world, we were chosen that we should be holy, which we are, and without blame before him in love, sinless and guiltless, as far as the east is from the west. So Jesus came where we thought we were, in a place of sin, in a place of separation. He came in that very place and demonstrated to all humanity, all the world, that place doesn't exist. He swallowed it up. He consumed it. He brought all of that illusion to the truth. And he took it upon himself. And then he walked right out of it and demonstrated and showed his glorious self to show us that it wasn't real. Even death is not real. And we no longer have to give any credence to illusions anymore. We are completely free. Not going to be free in the future. There is no future. There's only the now. Now faith is. And we have become that evidence. See, the full, complete evidence. We have become the full and complete substance of the reality of eternity, of the reality of love. That's who we are. That's who you are. That's who you've always been. That's who you will always be. You can live 100 lifetimes supporting the belief in separation and trying to prove that we're not that. And you cannot do it. You can only have nightmares of dreams of separation. You can only have this what we call body life experience of suffering, brutal suffering. But it doesn't change reality. We are who God created us, and we remain that way. Not as body identification, but we are these bodiless, we are the timeless and formless reality that is endless, that has no bounds, that has no restriction, that's borderless. We are impregnable. That's who we are. Now we've been asked to see that from a place that appears with all its appearances of limitation. We are asked to stand up and be a witness in a place that is totally opposite to that. And that's why you find yourself here. To stand up, to wake up, to wake up and be a witness, to be a light of the world and show the world that God is not a liar, that reality remains intact like Jesus did. Then he goes on to say that where I am, there you are right now. As I am, so are you guys in this world. That's what he says. Be the light of the world. Be the substance and the evidence. You are the certainty that it's all true. And so he says, and thus he judges you. Accept his word for what you are, for he bears witness to your beautiful creation. See, you are a beautiful creation. He says, and the mind who thought created your reality. We bear witness to the thought who created our reality. We are the witnesses. We are the evidence. We are the substance of things hoped for. We are the evidence of things not seen. We are the thought of God. That's our purpose here. He says, what can the body mean to him who knows the glory of the Father and of the Son? So where does the body add up? What value does the body hold in all of this? For he who knows what? He who knows the glory of the Father and the Son. We share the same glory that God shares. We share the same glory of equality with God. God gets no glory without the Son. And the Son gets no glory without the Father. So it's an equal, it's an equality that we share with God. This is the full evidence. This is where righteous judgment comes in. We have judged ourselves as guilty and sinners. And God has said, no, I have judged you in righteousness. You are sinless. You are innocent. You are whole. You are complete. You are holy like me. You are eternal like me. He said, you are of one truth like me, of one law. He said, you are unalterable. You are unchangeable. He said, you are unambiguous. He said, you can not recognized this, and you have not recognized this. He said, but you can't change it. He said, we are everything that God created. He said, we're the only thing that God's created, and that's reality. He says, what we're talking about here is beyond what can be learned. It's beyond what we can learn. He said, it is beyond time and space. It's beyond the limitation of time and space, which is just a temporary experience we're having. He said it has no opposites. Who you are has no opposites. That means you are the changeless one. He says who you are has no beginning. And who you are has no end. Why? Because you've always existed. You are eternal like I am. He said you merely are. You are the I am. This is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And see, now you can judge with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But you cannot judge with partial evidence that the eyes may show you or the ears may hear through their limited abilities. But there's no limit in the reality of our oneness with God. There is no limit in the shared being that we have, that we are with God. There is no limit. You can't take that which is limited and limit that which is unlimited. You can't take that which is changeless and change it with that which is all about change. I hope I'm making my point. I think I am. So now we see why it's folly to judge. It's folly for us to judge from a place of separation and limited evidence. Folly. So God is saying, don't do it. Because with the same measure you meet, it's going to be measured back to you. Now we understand why he said that. He says, what whispers of the ego can God hear? God's not even aware. Reality is not even aware of the senselessness of the ego's voice. He says, what could conceive of reality that seems to happen to you in this world? So what can this world do to change our reality? It can do nothing. It says, the lessons of God will enable us to bridge the gap between illusions and the truth. And that's what we're doing in this study. That's what we're doing in this 1-year training. We are bridging the gap, which in reality there is no gap, but we're bridging the gap between illusions and truth. So what we're doing, we bring the illusions to the truth. And the truth consumes the union, that consumes the illusions to the point where there is no truth. There is no illusion. And that's what Jesus' whole life demonstrated. His life, his death, his birth, his resurrection, his ascension, all that was symbolic of him consuming the dream of separation for all of us once and for all. And then he said, it is finished. So why are we still dabbing around? Why are we still having the residual effects of a non-existing reality? Why are we still playing around with children's toys? Why do we do it? Where is that propensity coming from? Well, he said it comes from ignorance and it comes from doubt. It comes from still giving over our focus, giving over our attention to the ego thought system, to the ego voice, to the internal chatter that tells us that we're nothing. It tells us we're not gods. It tells us we have a beginning and an end, which tells us we got to find ourselves out in the world, which tells us that this world is real. That tells us that our identification is tied up in these bodies. And all that uncertainty, all that instability only creates more suffering until one wakes up, until one becomes enlightened, until one recognizes there must be a better way. And so the gap is closed. When you wake up to the truth, there is no gap. There are no options. That's only reality. He says, he will remove all faith that you have placed in pain and in disaster and in suffering and in loss, which are all appearances that this world communicates to us. He says, in the righteous judgment, when we see as God see, it says, he will remove all faith that you have placed in pain and disaster and suffering and loss. He gives you vision, which can look beyond these grim appearances. It's grim appearances. The world is designed to give you grim appearances, to keep you from the truth. He says, and can behold the gentle face of Christ in all of them. Notice now, the Course says that Jesus was a man who saw the face of Christ in all his brothers and remembered God. That is the process, the journey that we're on. We are humanity. We are finding ourselves in this space called humanity. To see the face of Christ, to see the sinlessness and the guiltlessness, to see the eternalness, the whole and completeness in our brothers and sisters. He said, in so doing, we will remember God, or we will remember that we are one with God. So that's the process. Seeing the face of Christ in all your humanity. It takes a different point of view in order for us to see. It takes God's point of view. It takes God's sight, God's vision for us to see. And we must be willing. We must be willing to see through the eyes of truth in order to see the truth of who we are, to see the truth of who humanity is. But remember that we are God. That's what he's saying here. That's the process that Jesus went through. That's the process that all humans go through. You may have to live 1,000 lifetimes before you finally surrender to that. And it's okay. Because it's guaranteed by God. We're all going to do it. And what we're saying is, say, hey, look, wake up. Do you need more suffering? Do you need more pain? Do you need more evidence from the world that is not the way? Remember, he says, well, we all must take this course. We just get to decide when we decide to wake up. We don't get to choose the curriculum. We can choose our classrooms, but we can't choose curriculum. But we all are going to wake up to this reality. What we're saying is, hey, now is the time. Now is a better time than any. How much more pain and suffering do you need in your life? How much more convincing do you need to be convinced by the world? That is not the place of your happiness. It's not the place of your joy and your peace. It's not the place of your purpose. It's not the place of your identity. How much more time do you need? It says, you will no longer doubt that only good can come to you who are beloved of God. Beloved of God, the time is coming when you will no longer doubt that you are completely the beloved of God. For he will judge all happenings and teach the single lesson that they all contain. Notice what he said. He will judge all the happenings. He will judge all the happenings, and he will teach the single lesson that they all contain. They who? All the happenings contain. There's a lesson in every happening. There is a voice in all things that echoes the voice for God. So in other words, God is going to take all of the ego things and reinterpret them for you based on the truth. And so in so doing, teach us the single lesson that they all contain. What is the single lesson that we need to learn? I'm glad you asked. Let's keep going. He will select the elements in which represents the truth. See, he will select the elements that represents the truth and disregard those elements or those aspects which reflect the idle dreams. So in other words, this God is now in charge, or the God self that we are now in charge of discernment, of perception. It's in charge of making everything right. It said it will what? It will discern. It says it will select the elements. It says, and he will reinterpret all you see. Wow, see? Once we yielded ourselves to our true identity and see the face of Christ and allow God's eyes and God's heart and God's knowing to be our eyes, our heart, our knowing, which it is. There's only one of us. Once we have laid the false self aside, and now we're seeing through the eyes of Christ. Notice what he says here. He says, and he will reinterpret all that you see and all occurrences. Notice now, this is to the superlatives here. All. This is what's available to us. God is waiting for us to yield. God is waiting for us to surrender so that he can reinterpret everything that we see, all occurrences, every circumstance, and every happening that seemed to touch on us in any way from his one frame of reference. Wholly united and sure. So in other words, God is waiting for all the children of God to surrender to their true self, to surrender to the one point of reference, which we call reality, which we call Christ, which we call the I am. We call it by many names, which we call the awakening, which we call enlightenment, which we call being born again, which we call the renewing of the mind, which we call transformation. All those are just words that are pointing us back to the heart, back to the reality that we are. He said, once that happens, he said, God will reinterpret, or love will reinterpret or your own self will reinterpret for you all that you see, all occurrences, circumstances happening that seem to touch on you in any way from the one frame of reference, wholly unified and wholly sure. And you will see the love beyond the hate. So now it says, once this has happened, we will see the love beyond the hate in everything. We will see the love beyond the hate in everything. It says, we will see the constancy in change. We will see that even in this world of change, there is something that is unchangeable, that is something that is constant. It says that we will see the purity in what we call sin. We will see the guiltlessness, the fearlessness, and the sinlessness in what we call sin. Once we have accepted and embraced the one point of reference, the one point of view. It says we will only see heaven's blessings on the entire world. Once we have yielded to the truth, once we have submitted ourselves, once we have embraced and accepted the truth of who we are, everything changes. Everything that had impacted your past, everything that had impacted your present, everything that was impactful to your future will be reinterpreted based on the truth. And now our eyes and our ears and all of the elements of our life becomes what? The instruments of God. Our mind become the mind of Christ. Our understanding become the wisdom of God. And we begin to experience that peace, that joy, that happiness, that peace that is said that is beyond understanding, that passes understanding. The love beyond the hate. We will begin to see that love in everything. We'll begin to see the one lesson that we all need to learn. This what happens to us now. This happens in any moment, in any instant that we decide to surrender ourselves to our reality. And God is waiting on us patiently. God's not judging us. He waits patiently. We're judging ourselves with impartial evidence and using illusions. And that's why the pain and suffering. But it ends in the moment, in the instant that we yield, that we accept, that we embrace the reality, the truth that is true always about us and about our brothers and about our Father and about the world. God is waiting to reinterpret everything for us. And then finally it says, such is your resurrection. So he calls this process resurrection. It's our resurrection. So see, resurrection is not a physical occurrence as the world would teach us. It's not a physical happening. True resurrection happens when the mind that thought it was separated becomes on its own accord reunited with the reality of its oneness with its creator. By choice, by a decision, just through the simple process of recognize that it was in error. It was made a mistake. that sin is not real. I just made a mistake. And now I choose to correct the error by yielding my entire being to my reality, which has not changed. It's just that simple. So the Course says that is what true resurrection is. Resurrection happens in the mind. It doesn't happen to the body. Remember, the body, as well as this world, time and space, it's all part of the illusion. But that which is timeless and formless is what we reunite with. That's what true resurrection is. This whole process of that we've been going through on day 151, we've been in the process of resurrection. That's what true resurrection is. It says, such is your resurrection. For your life is not a part of anything that you see. See? Our life is not a part of anything that we see. It said, but our life stands beyond the body. This is our reality now. I'm just going to explain to you your reality. He said, our reality is not a part of anything that we see. That's not a reality. He says, our reality stands beyond the body and the world. That's why Jesus said, I'm in this world, but I'm not of it. His reality beyond the world. He said, our life, he said, it stands beyond the body and the world. It passed every witness of unholiness. It just moved right past all the unholiness that we were identifying ourselves with. It says, within the holy, holy as itself. You've heard me say it many times. You are the holy home of God. And you are. You are the holy home of God. You are holiness itself. Becoming aware of itself. It's called resurrection. That is who you are. That is who all humanity is. He says, in everyone and everything, see, in everyone and in everything, his voice, or the voice that speaks for God, the voice that speaks for truth, the voice that speaks for reality that we're not hearing because we turn our focus on that which is an illusion. But once we turn away from the illusion, he says that his voice would speak to you of nothing but your true self and your creator, who is one with you. So will you see the holy face of Christ in everything. Why? We're coming from what? This one point of reference. So will you see the face of Christ in everything, and hear in everything no sound except the echo of God's voice. This is the place that is calling you. This is the place that's calling all of us. This is the place that's called humanity back home to the heart of God, where we have never left. This is what we've been called to. This is the calling that Jesus said, many have called, but few have what? Recognized the call. But today is the day of salvation. Today is the day that we accept the call to reality. So he say, today we practice wordlessly, without words. Today we're gonna practice without words. Oh my God, I have given you enough word here. I have shown you the evidence. I have shared with you what reality really looks like, what the truth of you really looks like. He says, so we're going to practice wordlessly today, except at the beginning of the time we spend in communion with our Father. We introduce these times with but a single slow repeating of the thought which with which the day begins. And what is that thought? Now we understand what he's saying. All things are echoes of the voice for God. That God's voice speaks in everything. All things are echoes of the voice that speaks for God. And that voice that speaks for God is your very own voice. It's your very own nature. It's your very own self that we have buried, that we have covered up, that we have fenced up with illusions and with lies and with deception. Now we have what? We have uncovered all of the illusions. We have undone all the illusions. And what is left and what is revealed is the splendor and the glory and the eternal love that we are. And the sinlessness and the guiltlessness that we are. That's what's revealing. That is the Christ that you are. Paul said it this way. He said it was a mystery that was in the time past. It was held in time past. It was held in time past, but now being revealed. What is that mystery? Christ is you. Or he says Christ in you. But we're going a step further because Paul was still dealing with his own uncertainties. It's Christ is you. What is Christ? Again, Christ is what God created. It's the only thing God created. And in God's creation, he doesn't go get something else from somewhere else. No, God takes his very own self and extends himself. He gets outside of it's like God gets outside of himself and turns around and look at himself and calls himself the Christ. He said, I am that I am. And that's what we are. That's what we are a part of. That is what we are one with. In everything that goes along with that. Your wholeness, your completeness, your holiness, your righteousness, your eternalness, your unchangeability, your truth that is true always. And so he says, let him evaluate each thought that comes to mind. So today, we have given up our responsibility to be the judge. We live a judge-free and a judgeless life from this point on because there's nothing to judge. But we allow there's only one judge that judges righteously, and that's God. That's truth. That's reality. And so we relinquish ourselves from that responsibility anymore. He said, let him evaluate each thought that comes to mind. Remove the elements of dreams and give them back again as clean ideas that do not contradict the will of God. He says, give God your thoughts, and he will give them back as miracles which joyously proclaim the wholeness and the happiness God wills for his creation, of what God wills for you, as proof of his eternal love, as proof that we are God's eternal love. And as each thought is thus transformed, it takes on healing power from the mind which saw the truth in it and failed to be deceived by what was falsely added. And the threads of fantasy are gone. And what remains is unified into a perfect thought. We are a perfect thought of God that offers its perfection everywhere and to everyone. So today we're going to spend 15 minutes when we're awake and gladly give another 15 minutes before we go to sleep. This is our practice for today. Our ministry begins as all our thoughts become purified by God. We take every thought, we hand it to God to purify it and hand it back to us. That proclaimed wholeness and happiness and proof of his eternal love, of our eternal love. So that our thoughts, so that we are taught to teach all humanity the holy lesson of his what? Sanctity. That all humanity has been sanctified by the Holy One of all. That we are the sanctification. We are that which God is. We represent, we appear in the person of God Almighty in all his glory. Yes, we do. Sanctification. That is the lesson that we teach all humanity. That you have been what? Set apart. For and as God. Not for any other reason. But to share in his glory, to share in his equality, to share in his splendor, to share in his eternal reality. We have been sanctified. We have been set apart for that. All humanity, no exception. If you take an exception, you have not learned the lesson. You have not embraced the atonement. If you exclude anyone, if you hold any grievances, if you hold any unforgiving thoughts, if you hang on to any resentment of any other human being because of what's going on in the movie, you have not learned the lesson. So you have to come back again and again. But you will learn the lesson. It's a guarantee by God. He said, no one can fail to listen. When we hear the voice for God, give honor to God's creation. No one will fail to listen. When we hear the voice for God, give honor to God's Son. Today I give honor to all humanity. That all humanity is the sanctification of God. That all humanity is equal with God. I share this truth with all humanity here in 2022. This is the truth that is true always. That is the truth that sets one free. And we're all going to learn it at some point. I embrace it today. I embrace the atonement for myself. I embrace the sanctification for myself. I embrace the unchanging creation of God for myself. We have to accept it for ourselves. And everyone will share the thoughts with you which he has retranslated in your mind. So when you allow the Spirit, the holiness, the sanctification of God to be your identification, this thought is shared with everyone. In this moment, I hold the space for those that have not made that choice to say that my awakening is all humanity's awakening. That when I embrace the atonement for myself, I am not healed alone, but all humanity wakes up to this reality. And that every thought of God is retranslated in our minds. Such is your Eastertide. That's what the Course says. Such is your Eastertide. And so you lay the gift of snow white lilies on the world, replacing witnesses of sin and death. Through your transfiguration, we've moved from what resurrection to what transfiguration. This is your transfiguration. This is how Jesus experienced transfiguration as it been recorded. It was all in his mind. It was all in the embracing of the atonement for himself. It was all in his accepting the truth as true always. He went through a process of resurrection, sanctification, transfiguration. We're going through that process here. It's nothing, it's nothing out of the ordinary. This is a natural evolution for all humanity. It's like waking up from a dream of separation. And you all of a sudden you're in heaven. You realize everything is heavenly. You realize that everything is godly. Everything is whole and complete. And you're able now to look past the illusions because they're not real. He said, through your transfiguration is the world redeemed. So we redeem the world back to ourselves. We reconcile all the illusions back to ourselves, which is what Jesus did. He was in Christ reconciling the world back to himself. Through what? Through resurrection, sanctification, transfiguration. He says, through the transfiguration is the world redeemed and joyfully released from its guilt. Why? Because you don't hold the world guilty anymore. You don't hold anything guilty anymore. Remember, you're no longer a judge. It says, now do we lift our resurrected minds in gladness and in gratitude to the one who has restored our sanity to us. If you feel that in this world that you've been tinkering on insanity, you've been tinkering on depression, if you have felt in your lifetime that this world has made you drunk in all its messages, all its appearances, all its vile separation, all of the atrocities that you see, if you feel like what the appearances of the world has shown you is driving you to a place of insanity, that you've lost peace, that you've lost hope, that you're wondering where God is in all of this, you're wondering if there's any hope for the world, if there's any hope for yourself, or hope for someone that you love, that you see that is struggling with addictions or struggling with demons. When I say demons, and demons are no more than thoughts. There's no more than thoughts. They're not entities in and of themselves. It's just a metaphor for a unloving thought or unforgiving thought. So if you feel like, the world has weighed you down, Jesus said it this way: those who are laden and heavy burden. If you feel heavy burden by the appearances of this world, from what we discussed today, you see the light. You see the reality of who you are. You see your salvation. You see your resurrection. You see your sanctification. You see your transfiguration. You see how that you have already transcended this illusionary world into the world of reality. You see it now. So if you have to go back and listen to this again, please do. Because within what I share today it is the way, the truth, and the life. It is your freedom, it's your independence. It's your sanity. It's the way to have sanity restored back to you. And so he says, and we will hourly remember him who is salvation and deliverance. The truth is our salvation and our deliverance. Reality is our salvation and our deliverance. Your sinlessness, your guiltlessness, your innocence is your salvation and your deliverance. You have to embrace that reality. You have to let go of the things that we have learned that are opposite to reality. You have to evaluate what you believe, why you believe it, and is it adding to or taking away from the quality of your life? Even if it's something that you have studied and believed in for 50 years, if it's part of the problem, you have to let it go and embrace the reality. If it's part of the illusion that you were hanging on to, if it's part of the false identity that you was holding on to, you have to be willing to let it go and embrace the truth. No man can serve two masters. No man can serve error and correction, because you either hate one and love the other. Choose you this day the truth of who you are. The real you, truly, the real you that loves you. Choose you this day. So God is our salvation. God is our deliverance. Truth is our salvation. Truth is our deliverance. Knowledge is our salvation. Knowledge is our deliverance. The one law of God, the law of love, is our salvation and our deliverance. And we give thanks. Yes, we're so thankful. And we give thanks. The world unites with us and happily accept our holy thoughts, which heaven has connected or corrected and made pure. The truth corrects the error and makes pure. See, we have all erred. We've all been mistaken. And errors and mistakes can what? Be corrected. But we have not sinned. Why? Because sins cannot be corrected. So sin is not even a thought of God. It is a man-made idea that we can successfully separate from God. That's what sin is. And it's impossible. So see, you've never been a sinner. You've never been separate from God because it's impossible. So all this time, you've been the holy son of God, the daughter of God. You've been the holy home of God all this time, even through all the dreams of separation, all the hurt, all the pain, all the nightmare, all the scarcity, all the lack, all the lies, all of the abuse. Through all of that, nothing really happened to you. You remained as God created you. And heaven has corrected every error and every thought. Every mistake, heaven has corrected it and made it pure. So you are the purity. Jesus said that what in Matthew chapter 6, he said, what? Only the pure in heart shall see God. That's what he meant. When you embrace the correction, that you are holy and always have and will be holy, when you embrace that correction, you are the pure in heart, and you shall see yourself as and in God. Now has our ministry begun at last. So in reality, he said, until this point of reference is achieved, until this place of enlightenment and awakening happens, he said, your ministry hadn't really started. He said, you're really not ready to serve because you without this point of reference, without this truth, you will be serving your own demise and the demise of others. You will go out into the world as an unhealed healer, like we see so many unhealed healers out into the world, saying they got this ministry and that ministry, and they have not even accepted atonement for themselves. And that's why you see the craziness and the foolishness and what they call ministries. And some, there are healed healers out there, but it won't take long to recognize an unhealed healer. Because why? They would see themselves as sinners and call you a sinner. And say that God is the only one. We're just, But when you raise your level of awareness to what the truth is, it says, now has your ministry begun at last to carry round the world. Notice now, to carry round the world the joyous news that truth has no illusions. That truth has no illusions. And the peace of God that's now flowing in and through us belongs to everyone. That is the ministry of God. That is a true teacher of God. When they have gone through the process of resurrecting their minds, they have gone through the process of the sanctification, see the holiness that they are, to have returned to their original self, to come to know their true self, that real you that loves you, the purity, the sanctification in heart, where only like Jesus said, the pure in heart shall see God. Well, in everything and in everyone. Where that individual teacher of God has accepted the atonement for himself to the point that he's transfigured or has transcended this world and all of its illusions, and see only the holiness of God, see only what the face of Christ in all humanity, where there's no strife, where there's no separation, where there's no division, where there's only oneness, and able to look through all of the falsities of this world and all the illusions of this world, and only see the light of God in everyone and in everything. Until that happens, he said, the ministry really hasn't begun. But many have gone out as teachers of God, as unhealed healers, and sharing separation and division, sharing the idea that humanity has separated from God. You say, but this belongs to everyone. So that which I will receive, that which I've received, give I unto you. Because what I give to you, I give to myself, because you and I are one. We have a shared interest. And And that is the loveliness that is beyond this world. And so, you have seen your life. You have seen your reality. And our life remain a perfect thought of God, which is eternal love. Wow, I know this went a while, but it needs to go a while. It needs to go for a while. But it's my honor to be your temporary guide, to point you to your own reality. Thank you so much. Namaste.